Welcome to the ISO Show, dispelling myths and sharing tips for success to improve your business with ISO standards.
If you're listening to this podcast, then you're in great company. We've got thousands of listeners who have a thirst for continual improvement and raising standards in business. Whether your interest is in quality, sustainability, or risk standards, I'd love to welcome you as a member to our online platform for all things ISO, the Isologist Hub. The Isologist Hub is the leading place to get access to all of your online resources, from in-depth training courses through to our very popular coffee break training, to templates and action plans and many other resources to help raise standards. As a member, you get access to over 100 courses, taking you from learner to practitioner to leader. The Isologist Hub has all the resources that you need, which will really help to make your life easier and to help improve compliance in those business critical areas. So if you'd like access to learning and compliance resources ranging from data privacy to environmental management, anti-bribery, business continuity, quality, health and safety, to name just but a few, the list is endless then we'd love you to come and join us. Just head over to the isologihub.com.
Hello and welcome to the ISO Show. My name's Stephanie Churchman and I'm the Communications Manager here at Blackmores. In today's episode, we're continuing with our Meet the Consultant series where we introduce you to our team of Isologists. In this series, we take a bit of a step back from the technical world of ISO to learn more about the people who help demystify ISO implementation for our clients. Our team of Isologists come from a wide range of backgrounds with a collective skill set to implement over 20 ISO standards. Together, they've helped Blackmores support over 600 companies to achieve various quality, environmental and risk-based standards. Today we're introducing one of our senior Isologists, Derek Hall, who is our standards champion for ISO 22716, that's otherwise known as the Good Manufacturing Practices for the Cosmetic Industry. Derek is actually one of the first consultants Blackmores hired over 17 years ago now, with many of our clients requesting his assistance for going on 10 years in a row. So it's clear to see that Derek certainly makes an impression, and his work speaks for itself in the feedback we've received from his clients. In addition, Derek is also the lead of the Sustainability Dream Team here at Blackmores. Last week we spoke with Ali Henshaw, who makes up the other half of this duo, and Derek's passion for sustainability is a trait that's been with him long before joining Blackmores, and he's led us down the right path by ensuring we became a signatory of the Terra Carta. This in turn has led to an internal greater focus on sustainability objectives and creating a tangible impact through our sphere of influence, which is naturally passed on to our clients where possible. Derek certainly has a lot of wisdom to share, and the team has benefited immensely from his knowledge over the years. So without further ado, welcome Derek.
Thank you, and thanks for the intro. And yes, as you might have gathered, I'm sort of very passionate about sustainability and have been for a number of years with different organisations, prior to Blackmores. So my role is, in terms of work, has been with various types of companies, and I work with like media companies, printing companies, construction, cosmetics, as Steph just spoke about, recycling companies, electrical companies. And in the past I've dealt with some public sector organisations like the NHS and various others. So my role is sort of been, or has been, quite wide-ranging over the years. But for, leading back to sustainability, it's something I try to introduce with most of the clients I talk with. And it means different things to different people. So a lot of, key things is, you'll go into a client and the key thing they want to know, is what benefits they can get. And quite often we'll start with talking, monetary benefits, actually, which then in turn leads to, how do you do that? And of course, that makes me think, so how am I going to introduce or help to support their management system and try to improve upon it? And I think an absolute key thing with industries is trying to identify or understand what the industry does. So, I mean, I come from a printing background, which I'll talk about a little later on, but I come from a printing background myself, and I'm very aware that when you're talking to people, you need to sort of understand their role in the organisation. So my conversation to the managing director of a company will be slightly different to an operator on the shop floor, let's say.
Yeah.
Because, I'm a key believer that, it's all about people at the end of the day. It's about how people can improve what they're doing. And it's really trying to dig deep and understand, where they're coming from. And everybody brings their home life into the business, let's say. So that in itself is, you need a bit of an understanding of where they're coming from. So if you're sort of approached by, I'm talking away to, one of the shop floor operatives, his interest might be more on the football that happened last night. Well, actually, yeah, well, how can we talk about that, but sort of reintroduce, well, I'm really here to look at what we're doing on the shop floor. What impact do you have on that shop floor and how you can make improvements? And then your perception of the company. What good is the company? Is it people orientated? Is it driven by the senior managing people or not? So you start to get a feeling for how an organisation operates. The more you sort of dig deep into it. But as I've said a moment ago, I think it's key to try and understand what the company does. Now, when I'm with a printing company, of course I can talk shop more, but when I'm with a cosmetics company, and that takes me back to a few years ago when I started to look at cosmetics, I knew nothing about the cosmetics industry. So I had to really try and learn how, for instance, toothpaste is manufactured, how fragrances are introduced, and so on. So, it's a vast range of different sort of knowledge sort of sets that you need to sort of understand, but that can only be built up with experience and built up with speaking with people.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine, especially over the years, we've worked with a lot of clients. So from the sales side, I kind of see the prospects, and the amount of industries that we get through is, very, very varied. And I can say your approach definitely seems to work because, as I said before, people ask for you for ISO support. That's the ongoing annual support for ISO systems that we offer. Yeah, clients really cling on to Derek. They ask for him year after year, and I think he just makes it a seamless process with his approach. So yeah, thank you for summarising that. So that's your role at Blackmores, but I'd like to know a bit more about you as a person. So what do you do in your free time? What hobbies do you have?
Cool, dear. What hobbies do I have? Well, actually, I sort of quite like oil painting, which I sort of do when I get time. And that's born out of photography, which I like as well. I'm quite into photography. So a lot of my oil paintings are based on photographs that I might have taken. So I find that of quite interest, but obviously, as you'd appreciate, I don't get a lot of time to do that. However, what I do get a lot of time, it seems to do, is actually karate. I belong to a karate club, and I train probably 4 or 5 times a week. And that I started, funny enough, about a year or so before I started with Blackmores. And so I've worked my way up through the different belt levels, and I'm now currently a black belt. But what it does, there's a good analogy between karate and business, in fact, because it teaches you discipline, it teaches you respect, it teaches you other people's points of view. So it's not just about running around a hall or a dojo or a local sort of school hall, let's say, trying to practice your moves. It's actually we're quite inclusive, so we support anybody, and we support people from different backgrounds, and we support people with different physical attributes. So it's and it's open for all. It's an Australian-based club called GKR Karate. There's the advert. So and there's a lot, and they're up and down the country. The little little clubs in local halls, and all run by this company called GKR, and and it's well attended. And as I've sort of improved, hopefully, through the different belt levels, I've now become what's called a sensei. So I do a fair amount of instructing others. So, for instance, last Saturday, and on Friday nights, I actually helped to run the class. And last Saturday, I think we had something like 35 people in the hall for one class, and then about 25 for the second class. First class tends to be very sort of junior level, and the second class tends to be a bit more senior level. But that in turn brings in lots of people sort of skills. You're dealing with lots of different age groups. I could be dealing with little 5-year-old kids. I could be dealing with 55-year-old people. So, and the demands are different, both mentally and physically. So that sort of keeps me busy a fair chunk of the time.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I know that you never miss an opportunity to try and teach us some moves ahead of when we all gather as a team in person on those rare occasions. It's usually Derek's way to help us wake up in the morning is take us through 1 or 2 exercises.
Oh yeah, you see, as they say, you've seen nothing yet.
I know. I'm waiting for the day when you drag us all to one of the classes. I say drag, I'm sure many of us would be willing.
Well, that's a good. Funny enough, I've never thought of that. Now that is actually quite a good idea.
I've sparked an idea.
Because they're always asking for us senseis to introduce new members. So, Steph, you're top of the list at the moment.
Okay, put myself forward, have I? Okay then, so this is a bit that I'm always really interested in to hear for you guys, especially for you, Derek. What did you do before Blackmores? What was your path towards becoming an ISO consultant?
This could take some time.
That's fine.
So, many years ago, back in the early 60s, yes, I am that old, back in the early 60s, I worked, my first job was actually working in photography. I worked in commercial photography, and we used to go out to different building sites, in fact, and photograph progress on how a building was coming along or a project was coming along. Conversely, we also were photographing furniture stores, and we'd go out to different stores and photograph the latest bit of furniture. So those were in the days when, believe it or not, they still, even then in the early 60s, had plate cameras. So as in you'd see, 10/8 plates and put them into the back of the...
Proper old school.
Yeah, some really old, but even then that was old school. But also at that time we also used the latest technology, which was 35mm film. Yeah, so many memories of walking around sites, and I think one of the sites actually was the Thames Barrier. So I was down about 100 foot down, photographing how water was coming through the barrier, let's say, as it was being constructed. So that was good fun. After that, I've always been sort of very interested in art, as you gathered, and photography. So after that, I actually joined a printing company, in Barnet in Hertfordshire, and they printed various bits of point of sale and for different furniture shops, ironically, and various others. So from shop floor, I sort of worked my way up to becoming a printing operative, and did lots of different campaigns. And it was all very in its infancy in terms of the technical aspects, let's say. I'm not going to go too deeply into that, but yes, we did a lot of work for and it's predominantly screen printing. So we did a lot of work on different materials. Now, for those who don't know much about screen printing you can print on virtually any substrate. So you can print on things like paper and board, but you can print on plastic. You can print on baseball caps. You can print on T-shirts. You can print on various other substrates that other printing disciplines won't allow you to do. So, the companies like lithographic printing will only be able to print mainly on paper and board and some plastics, but screen printing has that benefit. So spent some time there, spent 3.5 years there, until I then moved, along with a friend of mine, we moved over to and started a little printing company in Watford. Continued to do the same type of printing. And then in the early 70s, I joined what was to me quite a large printing company. They were based in Southgate in London. And we printed, now you'll like this, we printed lots of cinema work, cinema posters.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so very good. And quad size, now you won't probably know what a quad is, but a quad is 40 inches by 30 inches in old money. And we used to print the latest films. Now, also you won't remember this, but back in the day, there used to be an A film and a B film when you went to the cinema. So you'd always have a little sort of, a mini film, let's say, prior to the main film. And so we did a lot of advertising on, cinema. Unfortunately, I didn't really keep many of the posters, which I should have done, because I had
Oh,
one
that's a
little
shame.
guy working for me, and he collected lots of these posters, and should have done. Because you're talking the days of like horror films, like Vincent Price films, House of Horrors type of thing. We're talking of things like Picnic Hanging Rock was another film that springs to mind. Films like Quadrophenia, like the Who. Because we used to also print for various groups. So we did advertising for people like Pearl Jam, the Bee Gees, and
Oh, wow.
so on. So, lots of different printing. But over the years, that company in itself, because I was with that company for probably approaching 40 years. So, but with that company, they evolved into large format printing as well. So they started to move away from cinema printing. Oh, and one thing I did miss, they did actually print a lot for retail market, like H&B Records and Curry's Dixon's, Rumbelows. Well, Rumbelows are no longer with us, I don't think, but but yeah, they moved more into large format printing, and large format printing is really things like sides of buildings, bus advertising, the things that you see advertised on the side of a bus, which depends on the type of bus, but there's a term called a T side or an L side, and that's the gap that's on the bus that you can print on. It represents a T or it represents an L. So we did a lot of that work, and as I say, lots of large format work, which things like 48 sheet posters, which is basically 12 posters stuck together to make one big poster. And and you can imagine when I'm printing 4 coloured detail, like the 4 primary colours in terms of print, cyan, yellow, magenta, black, where then our key things are actually, does each sheet match one another? So we'd have many sleepless nights on trying to check, how things worked. And then I suppose in around so I joined in about 72, and the company kept going till 2007, I believe. But yes, there was, I suppose, in the early 90s, a push to go more into standards. Because one thing I haven't explained is the companies that we dealt with were large advertising agents in London. So J. Walter Thompson, Saatchi's, all the big advertising agents, and they had lots of big corporate clients. People like Marks and Spencer's, Sainsbury's, EasyJet, and so on. And so they wanted, their adverts had to be very, very precise. So anyway, getting back to standards, in the early 90s, then sales director came in and said, "Oh, we've got this work for this big company, and they're asking us about standards. Can we introduce a quality standard?" So at that time, we introduced BS 5750, which is the precursor for ISO 9000 series. We also introduced a year later BS 7750, which is a precursor for ISO 14001. Yeah, I loved our sales director because whenever there was a problem with a job, he'd come in and say, "I thought we were a quality company. Now we've got this standard." I said, "Well, actually, it isn't quite like that. It's about improving your process. It doesn't mean you're going to be perfect." So yes, we've introduced those standards, and then as time moved on, we got involved in 9,000, 14,000. Started to report on our environmental impacts under a thing called EMAS. Now, EMAS stands for Eco Management Audit Scheme, and it's a bit like ISO 14001, but a little bit stronger on the regulatory front. And we had to report on our impacts annually. And I sort of grew that reporting mechanism into looking at other concepts. So those other concepts and ways of working were things like investors in people. We were an investor in people. Kaizen, the Japanese method of working. So we introduced lots of Kaizen improvements. But my job was to try to align all of these variety of different standards and methods of working into a sustainable system, let's say. And I got very involved in sustainability at this stage. And then at that stage, I developed a concept called our tree of sustainability. Tree being, we're a printing company and we use paper. So that had 9 branches for improvement. But areas like effluent, energy, people and learning, business and community, so we developed these 5 branches for improvement. Now those 5 branches of improvement then got reported on under EMAS. So it wasn't just a nice concept, it was actually, it had some real teeth to it. And then a year or so later, after developing that, I got involved with a DTI project, our backed scheme, and it was run by BSI, Forum for the Future, and the Institute of Accountability, and it was titled the Sigma Guidelines. Now the Sigma Guidelines asked different companies, like-minded companies, to work on a 3-year project and to identify what sustainability was. So all of this sort of work was sort of a precursor to, I think, some of the early sustainability standards, 900 I think it was. But yeah, the companies I'm talking about are companies like Marks and Spencer's. Their Plan A was developed through there. British Airways, Northumberland Water, Rugby Cement, World Wildlife Fund, our local council, Walthamstow Council at the time, and various others. So we spent 3 years probably, all these companies and us, and trying to develop what sustainability meant to us. So a lot of that learning could be taken back to our company and further develop what I was talking about, our tree of sustainability. And then that tree of sustainability became a real, even more of a real thing, because we reported under the Global Reporting Initiative within it. And we entered our sort of methods of working and that concept into various awards, and we won various sustainability awards, Institute of Accountability Awards, various London Sustainability Awards, and so on. So, it's a gradual sort of path, and, and that sort of set the scene for, so I suppose what I'm doing now under Terra Carta that you spoke about earlier. Now, and obviously Terra Carta, for those who don't know, is 100 different actions, and it was developed by His Majesty the King in his former role as the Prince of Wales. And it forms a key part to lots of our initiatives going forward. So I know you interviewed my colleague Ali just the other day, but yeah, we work very closely together on trying to align various initiatives and align that with the way that Blackmores work, and align various standards like 2400, 26,000, and so on. So we get, as you can imagine, get quite deeply entrenched in that.
Yeah.
So that's sort of, the path that I've followed. Probably in, I suppose it's 2008, I joined Blackmores, and as already said, work with different organisations to improve their systems of work. And that's me.
That's quite a lot. And again, it's really interesting how everyone has a similar story of kind of, it's not an aspiration to become an ISO consultant. Most people don't know what that even is.
No.
It's not a career that's widely advertised as something to go into, but it's usually the case that people sort of like, in and under the business that they're working in, it becomes a requirement to get these standards, and that you kind of either become part of the process or end up leading the process, and then it just becomes sort of a passion once you kind of get it. I think ISO standards is something that clicks for some people,
Yeah.
which is obviously all you guys and what you do.
Yeah, all the way. I don't think any of us are just walking around thinking ISO standards. We're actually, thinking how things can align with whatever the system is, and I mean, at the time in the 90s when we first introduced those standards, I dealt with a consultant, and the consultant was really helpful, and it helped us, it supported us, and actually go on to win the various awards I was talking about. And so now I suppose I've become that consultant.
Yeah, definitely. And as I mentioned before, your clients are always singing your praises, so I assume you've now taken on that role from their perspective as well. And I suppose that goes in quite nicely to my next question. What's your favourite aspect of being an ISO consultant?
Yeah, well, I suppose there are many, but I suppose main ones would be able to build relationships with clients, because many of my clients are actually personal friends as well now. So we've we have the same sort of if we've got the same sort of interest, we might get together, whatever. So that's always good. But I suppose a key thing about working for Blackmores is it's, I suppose, a flexible approach. So we're all sort of working remotely, but it's also a structured approach. We all have to perform and meet certain sort of targets, and that. How we go about that is different for each of us. We've got our own ways of working, obviously. And that's why when we get together, we share that knowledge. But yes, so I suppose it's, to my way of thinking, it's having a structured but flexible background, or way of working.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, thinking about it, we probably do. I mean, we definitely have our own targets. We have sort of objectives to set, and kind of doing 3 positive impacts a year, that type of thing. But we kind of leave it up to you guys to decide how you go about that and kind of gather the results. And I think it just works better for everyone having that different approach. Everyone works in different ways. People can learn from each other. I think that's why you guys all work so well together as a team. Yeah, just bouncing ideas and stuff off of each other. So I mentioned earlier in the intro that you're our standards champion for the cosmetic standard ISO 22716, and I know obviously you specialise in other standards as well. So what standards specifically do you specialise in, and why?
Well, the primary standards, and I don't, actually, it's a good question, why? Actually, why? Yeah, but yeah, the primary standards would be 9001 on quality and 14001 on environment. I deal with a lot of SMEs, and SMEs have their own special needs, let's say, and I think Ali spoke before on the previous podcast about their own special needs and restrictions on their time. And especially if you're dealing with a small company and there's 5 people, they're all wearing various hats, all doing various jobs and so on, and you're trying to align it to, I don't know, training and development, you're trying to align it to operations, you're trying to align it to, when the next bill is going to be paid and so on.
Yeah.
So in terms of standards, I suppose the real primary standard would be 9001. But quite often we've built up 9001 and joined it with 14001. And also we've actually aligned it with the cosmetic standard in cosmetics companies as well. So you've got a trilogy of standards. Now, similarly, I do work for construction, and we run a triple system there, but in this case it'd be 9001, 14001, and the health and safety standard 45,001. So I do a fair amount of sort of other work in other standards, let's say. And then there are the things that on the side of, call it standards, initiatives call it, but I mean, for instance, I've worked with a thing called For Life, which is, call it a social standard. And that's got various clauses which align very nicely with 14,001. And so there are other sort of standards and initiatives that we join. We might well join in concepts like Kaizen I spoke about earlier on, with methods of working, with the standards used. Obviously, there's a whole array of different standards that I'm working with, ISO 26000, ISO 2400, and various other standards. And I'm always looking at and researching new standards coming through, because that's part of the other side of my job, which is working on the Terra Carta and the initiatives. So I'm looking at things like ESG initiatives. I'm looking at Sustainable Development Goals, the United Nations Development Goals, and how various things align to our objectives going forward. So, but the three primary ones are the ones you've listed, already, the sort of day-to-day ones, let's say. But there are other things, and they're more recently, I suppose, business continuity. So a lot of companies won't want to go for a business continuity standard, but for example, I'm currently working with a client on business continuity initiatives and auditing under business continuity, but under the umbrella of ISO 9001. So you can see the standards in themselves can be quite flexible. It talks about having a management system. What that management system is, it's not that prescriptive. That's down to the company and how it suits the company. So, that's about it, really.
So I'm not surprised to hear that business continuity is cropping up now, especially because a lot of business continuity concerns are sort of cropping up around sustainability, with climate change becoming an issue for a lot of people. Obviously, that's starting to affect more home turf, especially here in the UK, when things get too hot and power outages happen. These kind of things are becoming more and more common. So I guess with recent events that have happened, people are starting to think more about that.
Yeah, well, that's been a little gem. I'm glad you brought up climate change, because climate change, which I hadn't really spoken about, obviously it's a key part of sustainability, but climate change has been threaded into ISO 9001, ISO 14001, business continuity, information security standards, which I don't get involved with, but my colleagues do. But there's been clauses 4.1 and 4.2, I'm being sad now, they're talking about you need to ask whether climate change is applicable to you. So even though you won't find it currently in the standard, it's actually, you'll be asked it on an audit, let's say, from an external body. An external audit company will ask, are you, the organisation, reviewing climate change? So suddenly that could throw a client out, because the client might have only had his ISO 9001 standard. He won't find anything about climate change in there currently. So, there are little gems like that you have to watch.
Yeah, I'd say if anyone wants to learn more about that, the climate change amendment that came in, because that was a shock to everyone, I think, when that came in. It was just kind of announced, came out of the blue, and then everyone was expected to kind of get on board and deal with it in a couple of months. But we do actually have a podcast covering that, and I believe a workshop recording. So I'll link those in the show notes for anyone who's interested in learning a bit more about those.
Yeah, that'd be good, yeah.
Okay, then. This is another thing that I'm quite nosy about. What was the biggest challenge you had during a project, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, well, it's projects past and current, I suppose. And probably, one example would be to introduce 22716 when I knew nothing about 22716. And to introduce that into a cosmetics company. And okay, we had a few gaps and problems to begin with, but we resolved them and we got the company through. But then, of course, that company also said, well, can we introduce things like ISO 14001? So there's us drawing an analogy with, say, cosmetics ingredients and what's the environmental impact?
Mm.
Are there things like, how are you sourcing materials? How are you sourcing things? Is it no animal testing and so on? So you get involved quite deeply into those areas. And then, of course, come full circle, they also wanted 9001 as well. So, fortunately, 9001 aligns with 22716 because 22716 is all about good manufacturing practice. So, it's all about having good procedures in place, standard operational procedures in place, and they align quite well. But then, the challenges are challenges within challenges because, for instance, 9000 and 14001 ask about risk and opportunities. Now, risk and opportunities are really interesting because then that'll link back to the cosmetic standard as well as the 9, as well as the 14. And trying to develop areas and registers to track things can be quite something. And another example maybe would be the 4Life standard, social standard, which got lots of different factors. It's looking about the supply chain, how friendly are the products that you're buying in, and aligning that with this current system of 9 and 14 for a particular client. And because there's lots of social impacts coming in, and this is probably why things like ESG has become quite something. And I know you've done various podcasts on ESG and so on. So there are sort of challenges, within challenges, let's say. So I wouldn't say there's one.
Yeah, I think that's another common theme among the consultants is, it's no one, I don't think, has picked just one challenge. It is multiple of things. And again, quite a few of these have similar ones as well. So, interesting. Okay, then I think I have time for one last question. And it's, what is your proudest achievement? And this can be in life in general. It doesn't have to be ISO specific. It's completely up to you.
Well, I suppose there's one thing that comes above most other things, and that is when I received an MBE from the then Queen for services to the environment. So that was back in 2005. And that was built on the back of all of that work I spoke about earlier on sustainability. So it was judged quite stringently. There was if I remember rightly, about 3 different levels that they'd go into, so they're looking deeply at the financial factors behind that. And what I hadn't explained there, prior to that MBE, we won the Queen's Award for Sustainable Development, and for the work we were doing. Because in my previous life, we had things like site visits where we'd have different organisations coming in to see our best practice, and for us to sort of explain that, but also to show what gaps we had and what failures and problems we had as well. So it's all of that work that sort of culminated, I suppose, in that receiving the MBE, and it was really nice because my family that I haven't spoken about, my son and my daughter and my wife, we could all go to the palace and meet the Queen. So, and for my case, it was the second time because I'd met her before on the Queen's Awards. So, something else.
Well, it must have been quite an experience. I think I remember Mel mentioning that she spotted like a picture when she interviewed you at your house of that sort of all taking place, and that raised questions, and explaining the similar thing to her back then. But yeah, that's a fantastic achievement. Obviously, now it's switched to the King's Award, and funnily enough, I've been looking into it because we've just been looking at awards from our side, and the requirements are quite high. There's a lot you have to prove, and it's good because it means that the companies that win it definitely do deserve to win it. So not a small achievement by any means.
No, that's right. Well, with the King's Award and prior to that the Queen's Award, it's various levels you go through. You get through the initial level, but then the second level they're going to dig deeply into the financials, and then obviously so it goes on. And but that's I suppose the main thing from a from a business point of view, let's say. But it obviously crosses into personal view. I'm looking across and actually I see a picture of my wife and children, which is quite nice, all standing outside the palace. So.
That's great. Well, thank you very much for sharing all of that with us today, Derek. And thanks for coming on to the show. I really appreciate you taking the time to record with me.
It's all right, my pleasure, as always.
I'm sure we'll have you on again to talk about one of your topics, probably on sustainability, or another one on 22716 at some point.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, no, that'd be my pleasure. Because I'm obviously developing a few more initiatives, so we need to get back to them.
Yeah. Well, before we go, I'd just like to remind everyone to, if you could please like and share this podcast on your preferred media player. If you do have a few minutes to spare, it'd be nice if you could leave us a nice shiny 5-star review. That would be really appreciated, as that does help us to reach a wider audience. As always, if you have any topics you'd like to hear us talk about, feel free to email us via inquiries@blackmoresuk.com. We'd love to hear from you. So that's all from me now. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch up with you on the next ISO show.
Looking to use ISO standards to drive better business practice? Contact us at blackmoresuk.com to access further information and book your free 15-minute call.